7 brain-boosting habits to improve focus after 60, stay sharp and energized daily. Hello my old friends. Have you ever walked into a room, intended to do something, and suddenly forgot why you came there? Or been in the middle of telling a story, and suddenly couldn't remember the name of a very close acquaintance? I believe all of us have experienced that feeling. And as we get older, it seems like these derailments happen more and more. Sometimes it's just a small thing, but sometimes it makes us feel confused, even lose confidence. It's as if our brains are gradually moving away from what used to be so agile and sharp. But is that really because of age? Or is it simply because the brain needs to be exercised like muscles? I've asked myself that question many times. And it's those times of curiosity that lead me to something very surprising, that memory, concentration, and clarity are not things reserved for the young. They can still develop, even when we are in our 60s, 70s, or beyond. When I started to dig deeper, I realized that there are simple but surprisingly effective activities that can significantly improve concentration. They are not complicated exercises, do not require drugs or high-tech equipment, but just small actions, sometimes very ordinary. And the magic is that when we do them regularly, a little bit every day, the mind seems to be awakened again. It begins to pay more attention, remember longer, and especially helps us feel more proactive in every moment of life. In today's journey, I invite you to join me in exploring the activities that have really helped me and many people of the same age feel a clear difference in the way we focus, think, and live more fully every day. And maybe, when you hear this, you will wonder, so what are those activities? Let's start with something that sounds simple, but is incredibly powerful: intentional walking. When it comes to walking, you might think, oh, I walk every day, what's new? But what I'm talking about here is not just walking around for the sake of it, or just walking around. It's walking with intention, with attention to each step. Imagine you're walking out of your house on a quiet morning. The wind is blowing, the trees are rustling. But instead of letting your mind wander to yesterday's events, your children, or the news on TV, you put all your attention into each step. Feel your feet touching the ground. Hear the birds chirping, see the leaves moving in the wind. That's mindful walking, a way to focus your mind on the present, helping your brain to leave the distractions of everyday life. Scientists call it mindful walking. And researchers at Harvard University have shown that practicing mindfulness regularly, even for just 10 to 15 minutes a day, can help improve concentration, reduce anxiety, and strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles attention and decision-making. Interestingly, I challenged myself to walk every morning, without my phone, without talking to anyone, just walking silently and observing. After a week, I felt my mind calm down. There was no more flickering in my head like before, and the best thing was that I started to remember small details, the name of an old friend, a favorite song, or stories from the past that I thought I had forgotten. It all came back to life. If you find mindful walking too difficult to start, don't worry. Just try 5 minutes a day, walking around the garden, around the neighborhood, or even in your backyard. What matters is not the distance, but the attention you pay to each step. At first, your mind may still be running around, but slowly, you will find yourself mastering your own rhythm. Like me, I used to mistakenly think that I was walking just to exercise, but now I understand I am walking to nourish my clarity. And you know, from the habit of walking with purpose, I gradually found another activity, quiet but equally powerful, that is writing by hand. You may be thinking, writing? Who writes by hand anymore? People use phones and computers all the time. But it is the very act of returning to a pen and a notebook that helps my brain work more deeply. Not just writing for the sake of writing, but writing down my true thoughts every day. Sometimes it is gratitude, sometimes it is a small plan, or simply recording the events that happened during the day. Writing by hand requires the brain to coordinate language, movement, and memory. When you write, you have to think, choose words, and control your hand muscles in a subtle way. Scientists at UCLA have studied and concluded that writing by hand stimulates the hippocampus, the area that stores long-term memory. Writing also helps organize thoughts more clearly, increases memory, and improves attention. I still remember the first time I started keeping a diary after more than 20 years. At first, my handwriting was sloppy and my hand was stiff, but after a few days, I began to think more clearly. One day, I was in the middle of writing when I suddenly remembered that I had not replied to an old friend's letter, something I had completely forgotten about. Isn't that strange? Writing by hand every day is like talking to yourself. It doesn't have to be something other people need to read, nor does it have to be fancy or long-winded. Just be honest with yourself. You can write every morning when you wake up, or every night before you go to bed. Some people even write down 3 things they are grateful for each day, and it not only helps them focus, but it also helps them feel more relaxed. And once you get into the habit of taking a walk with purpose and writing by hand every day, you will definitely notice that your mind starts to lighten up. Another simple and effective activity is playing brain games. Yes, playing games, but not the complicated computer games or the apps that constantly scroll across your phone screen. I'm talking about the old-fashioned kind, like crosswords, Sudoku, jigsaw puzzles, or even learning to play a simple musical instrument like the harmonica. Playing brain games engages the brain in a different way than it does in everyday activities. It requires thinking, remembering, reasoning. Some mornings I spend 20 minutes doing the Sunday Times crossword, and I find myself awake the whole time. The more I play, the more I realize one thing: my brain still has a lot of potential, it's just that it hasn't been awakened for a long time. Some of my friends even form small groups, playing dominoes or chess together every week. It's both fun and a way to practice concentration in a warm friendship. A large study at the University of Exeter in the UK showed that people over 60 who regularly play intellectual games have the ability to maintain higher information processing speed and have a 30% lower risk of mental decline than those who don't play. Just by being regular, a little bit every day, our brains will gradually become flexible again, like joints that are regularly exercised. When I tell my children that I'm playing Sudoku and doing crossword puzzles, they joke, "Dad, I'm like a student again." But it's that student feeling that makes me feel more alive every day. Don't you think so? So, we have gone through 3 activities together: purposeful walking, handwriting, and playing mind games. These seemingly simple things, but when we really put our minds to them, can bring back the focus and clarity that we thought we had lost. But this journey continues. Because our brain, like a garden, if properly tended, will continue to bloom. And in the next part, I will take you deeper into activities that not only help the mind focus more, but also help the heart feel more peaceful. Have you noticed, when our mind becomes calmer, our focus also gradually returns? The 3 activities that we have shared together are like 3 doors that open a path where we not only regain clarity, but also find ourselves. But this journey does not stop. Because concentration comes not only from cultivating awareness, but also from connecting deeply with your emotions, your body, and the world around you. And that brings me to the 4th activity, breathing meditation. I know that when you hear the word meditation, many people immediately think of sitting cross-legged for hours, eyes closed, thinking nothing. But the reality is much simpler. Breathing meditation here is not about turning yourself into a Zen master, but about learning how to return to your breath, the closest thing, and also the most neglected thing in everyday life. I remember the first time I tried breathing meditation. I sat on my familiar wooden chair on the porch, put my hands on my knees, closed my eyes, and simply paid attention to my breathing in and out. At first, my mind was running wild, remembering things to do, remembering yesterday's story, remembering something from 30 years ago. But then, after a few minutes, there was a moment when I felt like I was truly here, not caught up in the past or worried about the future. Just 5 to 10 minutes a day of sitting still and paying attention to your breath can do wonders. Scientists at the University of Wisconsin found that older adults who practiced mindful breathing meditation had lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and were 20% better at maintaining focus on memory tests than a group that didn't meditate. I don't need you to meditate for an hour. You can start with 3 minutes. Right after you wake up, or before you go to bed. No special space, no wind chimes or scented candles. Just you, a quiet place to sit, and a simple intention: I'm breathing and I'm here. I shared this with a close friend in New York, a retired college professor. He said, "I can't sit still for too long. I get restless." So I asked him to try something else, meditating while doing the dishes. It sounds funny, but it works. Just paying attention to the flow of water, the feel of the soap bubbles, the smoothness of the dishes under your hands, is a way to bring yourself back to the present, to help your mind not wander. Since then, he has been the most regular dishwasher in the house, and says it has never been more enjoyable. Meditation, of any kind, is all about inner stillness. And that stillness breeds concentration. You don't have to try to think clearly anymore, because clarity comes when the mind is quiet enough. And you know, when the mind is quiet, deeper things begin to appear. Like when the ripples on a lake calm down, you can see the bottom of the water clearly. And that's where we need another activity, something not to study but to live. That is music. You've probably heard a lot of music in your life, from country music in Nashville to smooth jazz from New Orleans. But I'm talking about listening to music consciously, not to kill time or fill a void, but to feel each note as if it were a part of yourself. Music has a special magic. It can take us back in time, awaken memories, and most of all, revive emotions. When you listen to a favorite song, your brain produces dopamine, a neurotransmitter that makes you feel excited and happy. And when positive emotions arise, your attention is also opened. A study by the U.S. National Institutes of Health showed that people over 60 who listened to classical music for 20 to 30 minutes a day for 6 consecutive weeks had significant improvements in attention and language processing. But you don't have to listen to classical music if you don't like it. The important thing is that you choose music that makes you feel calm, deep, or simply alive. I like to listen to old jazz, the kind of music that Louis Armstrong plays on the trumpet, or Billie Holiday sings sad, poetic lines. A friend of mine in California once shared that every morning he spends 15 minutes listening to a piece of music that he loves, closes his eyes, and lets his mind follow each note. Then he sits down at his desk and writes, and the difference is that he writes faster, more focused, and is less distracted by the noise around him. Music, in that way, is not just something to enjoy, but a tool to direct the mind. And I know, in this day and age, there are many genres of music that distract us more than they focus us. But once you choose the right frequency of your heart, music becomes the best companion for clarity. And did you know, after music, there is another activity, very close but often forgotten, that has a huge effect on concentration? That is gardening. I know not everyone has a large backyard, but even a few small pots on the porch or in the kitchen are a great place to start. Gardening is not just about growing vegetables and flowers, it's about reconnecting with the soil, with the rhythms of nature, and especially with your own patience and attention. When you plant a seed, you can't force it to grow faster. You have to tend to it every day, observing every little change, a new leaf emerging, the color of the soil dry or wet, enough sunlight or not. All of that requires concentration and patience. And it's when we do these seemingly small things that our brains are trained to pay more attention to the present, reducing distractions. Researchers from the University of Texas found that older adults who regularly gardened were 25% better at maintaining visual spatial attention than those who didn't garden. I remember last spring when I tried growing some cherry tomatoes in some pots on the balcony. Every morning, I went out to look at them, trim the dead leaves, and water them. One day I found a caterpillar nibbling on a leaf, so I sat there for a whole afternoon just watching it. It sounds like a waste of time, but it was actually a great meditation. My mind was completely focused on what was in front of me, no more wandering thoughts. And then when the first tomato ripened, I felt like I had won some small victory in life. You can start by growing some herbs, like mint, basil, or coriander. They are easy to grow, fragrant, and every time you step into the kitchen, you will feel the presence of nature in every meal. Gardening is not a job, it is the art of slow living. And in a world where everything seems to be in a hurry, slowing down is the way to maintain focus, peace, and lasting joy. You see, breathing meditation, music, and gardening, these are 3 activities that are slow, quiet, and yet have a powerful impact on the mind. When I look back on this journey, I suddenly realize focus is not something too esoteric. It is simply the ability to stay completely with something, a breath, a sound, a young leaf. And if we can do that every day, even for a few minutes, our brain, heart, and life will be very different. We have gone through 6 activities together, from the movement of the body to the stillness of the mind. But there is still one last activity, something that seems very private but has a strangely pervasive power, helping to maintain focus and connect deeply emotionally with this life. I invite you to join me on this journey in the next part. There is a strange but familiar thing that I have noticed over the years of slowing down. When we truly spend time with something in full presence, whether it is breathing, listening to music, or looking at a new bud in the garden, the mind is refreshed. It is like a door opens, and inside there is clarity, the ability to pay attention without being pulled away by the constant noise of life. But I want to invite you to go one step deeper, to a 7th activity, one that requires no tools, no space, just you and another person, deep conversation. I am not talking about small talk like "Isn't it a nice sunny day today?" or "What's for lunch?" I am talking about real conversation, where 2 people listen to each other with their whole hearts, without interrupting, without trying to correct or analyze. A conversation where you don't have to state your point of view, but simply be present, listen, and be heard. In today's world, such conversations are becoming rare, not because people lack time, but because they lack attention. I remember once chatting with an old friend. We met again after more than 30 years apart. At first, it was just old stories, asking about family, children. But then, when we sat silently for a few seconds after a deeper question, "Do you feel like you've lived the life you wanted?" the conversation really began. We talked about things we had never dared to say, fears that no one saw, and dreams that had been forgotten somewhere in life. And I realized that, during those 2 hours, I didn't lose focus for a single second. All my senses seemed to be expanded, my heart was calm and deep, like a lake reflecting the light at the end of the day. Deep conversation doesn't just make us feel connected, it's also a great exercise in paying attention. When you're really listening to someone, you can't be thinking about what to cook tonight or the bills that haven't been paid. You have to be there, present, asking questions, feeling the answers, and sometimes, just keeping quiet at the right times. Multiple studies from Harvard University have shown that deep conversation increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain that controls reasoning, memory, and attention. And the beauty is that the effects don't just last during the conversation, they last for hours afterward. If you're thinking, "I don't have anyone to talk to that deeply," I invite you to start. It could be your spouse, a child, a close friend, or even a neighbor you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be anything big, just a genuine desire to know, "How are you feeling today?" and an open heart to the answer. It's from these seemingly small things that a deep connection can develop. And in that connection, you'll be surprised to see how focus, which seems like a purely intellectual skill, is nurtured by genuine affection. I also want to tell you a story about Frank, a man in Vermont whom I met at a senior mental health event. He told me that every morning he calls an old classmate of his, and they've been doing it for 4 years. "We don't talk much," he laughs, "but we always talk honestly. Sometimes it's only 10 minutes, sometimes 40. But after each call, my mind is clear, my heart is lighter." I believe that not every call is philosophical or emotional, but it's the act of paying attention to another person and receiving the same presence in return that keeps our brains sharp. So we've gone through 7 activities together, 7 doors that open up a life with clearer, deeper focus. From mindful walking, handwriting, memory games, to breathing, music, small gardens, and finally honest conversations, you can see, none of these activities require high technology or special talent. They only require one thing: are you willing to slow down and be true to yourself? The great thing is, at this age, we have an advantage that few young people have, that is life experience. We understand what is essential, what is temporary. And that understanding is the foundation for recreating focus, not through pressure or coercion, but through conscious choice. It doesn't take much time. Just a small moment each day, to breathe deeply, to listen, to feel, to plant a tree or write a short paragraph, is already the beginning of a journey back. I know, sometimes we will forget. There will be days when the mind wanders, mornings when the mind is foggy, or afternoons when we feel like we are living in a fog. But trust me, that is normal. The important thing is that you don't give up. Every time you come back to your breath, to a song, to a sincere call, it is a time you say to yourself, I am still here, I am still alive, and I am still choosing to be awake. If you find any of these 7 activities make you feel lighter, more focused, keep it as a companion. Share it with your family, friends, or in the comments below this video. I look forward to reading your story, because each share is a seed, which can sprout in the heart of someone who is looking for focus in the midst of a busy life. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe so we can continue to accompany each other on the journey of living happily and healthily at all ages. There are many lovely things waiting for us ahead: peaceful mornings, sunny afternoons, warm smiles. And I believe, when our minds become clearer, we will also see this life much more beautiful. Wishing you a gentle day, with a deep breath, a warm gaze, and a steady mind. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, remember that you can start over, little by little, starting today. Thanks for listening. Goodbye and see you in the next video.